Um, I wanted to ask you a question, and it's more along the personal lines. And you shared some photos at ICAST of, well, you shared all your condor photos, which were spectacular. But then near the end, you shared some photos of what it takes to get these shots that you were sharing with us. What's the most precarious situation you've been in personally, chasing around these green snakes?
A good question. Obviously, the hardest part about being in these areas, I grew up in the bush, and so I'm fairly adept or comfortable in remote situations. It's always the human factor that is the unknown factor. Um, there are issues, particularly in Papua, because I don't know if you know much of the history, but the Dutch moved out in the 70s. Basically, the Indonesians pushed the Dutch out because Irian Jaya was a Dutch colony, and took over Papua. Papuan people actually wanted independence, but Indonesia didn't give it to them, mainly because it's very resource rich. It has the world's largest gold and copper mine, among other things. And so it's obviously a good strategic thing for the Indonesian government to keep hold of, but that didn't go down too well with the Papuan people, and so they formed a militia group called the OPM, which is like a Free Papua movement, and so there is a lot of tension between Papuans and Indonesians, and we saw people gunned down in the street.
Wow.
Policemen opening fire into peaceful protests and killing people, OPM retaliating and killing Indonesian women and children, just indiscriminately opening fire into crowds. So that's part of the other thing about it is, people can be living normally day to day, and then these things happen once in a blue moon. And I guess if you spend enough time there, you'll eventually come across something like that. And I should quickly add that that's part of the problem also, because, there are human rights violations going on there, and who really cares about the conservation of wildlife, and in particular snakes. Snakes are animals that most of the world hate. And so why would anyone give a crap about snakes when there are people dying, not on a daily basis, but, every now and then? And, there's extreme poverty and so on, and so it's a funny thing. There are probably the most precarious situation, which happened more than once, but Papuans will often cut a tree down and across a road, and then they'll sit there for a long time, perhaps a couple of days, cutting it up. And then you come along on your bike or in a car, mainly on a motorbike, because we couldn't afford a car, but come along on the motorbike, and they would want to tax you for using the road. And basically the thing is, there's a tree in the road, we're doing you a service by cutting it up, and therefore you have to pay us, even though they cut down the tree in the first place. And we were driving along one day, actually on the way to Lere, which it's on the northern side of the highlands, and we're driving along this tiny little dirt track. It's a crappy little dirt track. Perhaps it was even raining. On the motorbike with Jess on the back and me on the front, and our pack full of gear and our spotlights and so on. And these guys jump out of the bush, and their eyes are bloodshot, perhaps drunk or high on betel nut or whatever it could have been, and they're wielding machetes, and they're shouting at us to stop and so on. And I've got Jess on the back, who's a reasonably good-looking girl, and you have no idea what's going to happen if you do stop. So you just have to, pump the accelerator on the motorbike and hope for the best. Close your eyes and hope for the best. And on a number of occasions, nothing happened. But I suppose all it would take for them was to hold out a machete, and they could do you some serious damage. But I'd hate to know, what would happen if you did stop on those occasions. But in fairness, our experiences in Guinea were relatively mild compared to a lot of other people. Common sense and a good ability to travel and laugh and make friends go a long way, because there are a lot of fantastic people there. It's just, you hear the stories of the one or two that can ruin it and turn most people away for good.
Right.
Yep. Like everywhere in the world, unfortunately.
Exactly.
So, what does the future look like for chondros in their native territory?
Yeah, like I said, I think they're relatively secure. I would love to see Indonesia implement a program where actually legalized, well-regulated collection. But as you can appreciate based on what I just said, there are more important issues to do with human rights before they start thinking too much about the wildlife. And Papua, because of just some of the things I've described, is a politically sensitive area, and so I don't know if anything will happen anytime soon. But ideally, I'd love to see a sustainable use program set up where a small amount of money they get from the sale of wild-caught chondros goes back to local communities, etc., and provides greater incentives for habitat conservation and those sort of things. Because it's not going to have any lasting effect on wild populations of these species, and it can give you guys and other interested people around the world an opportunity to get some of the rarer localities or micro localities or whatever anyone likes to call them, and it could be a win-win for everybody,
Right.
with no adverse impact on the species, and perhaps actually provide a conservation benefit in the long term, because these people will actually sustainably harvest and maintain sufficient populations in the wild, instead of not giving a crap and cutting down all the forest and screwing the populations anyway.
Right. Well, what does the future hold for you, Daniel?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not doing a lot with convos anymore. I am a bit of enforcement stuff, sort of looking at methods to, I suppose, fairly sophisticated methods to differentiate between captive breed and wild-caught animals. It is coming, not for the everyday keeper, obviously, but for enforcement agencies of various governments. I won't elaborate on it too much because I want to give it the best chance of success before everyone sort of finds out. And then myself, I'm doing a lot of work on other species of pythons, like I said, the scrub pythons and blackheads and carpets and so on. Right behind me here in the office, I have 3 scrub pythons, a carpet, 2 spotted pythons, a slaty grey and a brown tree snake sitting in bags, which I've got to measure today.
Nice.
And so yeah, it's a life filled with snakes and more adventure, which is how I like it. It's hard to tell what'll happen in the future.
Right. What about will there be any more papers in the near future from you?
Yeah, so I'll send you a couple which perhaps you don't know about, which have been published, and also there's one which I wrote a long time ago, which is coming out soon in the Journal of Herpetology. That journal takes a very long time to review and publish its works. So even though a lot of the data was collected in about 2007, it's only being published in 2014, which isn't exactly a great turnaround. But yeah, so there's that, and then there's a number of papers. I don't think any more papers on green pythons, but then there's a number of papers on scrubbies and carpets and all sorts of other things, which will be really interesting. Doing a lot of radio telemetry at the moment, so following around a couple of, well, not a couple of, good number of scrub pythons, some of which are pushing on the 4 to 5 metre mark, which is interesting, and getting some great insights into what they're doing and the habitats they're using and what they're eating and those sort of things. Yeah, and in my experience, 9 out of 10 snakes of all species are fantastically docile. You can just walk up and pick them up, and there are individuals which will have a go at you, and there are certain species, for example, slaty grey snakes, which are a polyhybrid we get here, which they're guaranteed to bite you every single time. But the vast majority of pythons are really, really, really tame, and you couldn't say that about any other animals. The cute and cuddly koalas and possums and other things which people love. If you catch one of those in the wild, it'll tear your face off.
Right, absolutely. That's an excellent point.
Absolutely.
No, not at all.
We'd love to have you back.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll look forward to it, and thank you both very much for giving me the opportunity to rant about things that I also enjoy.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your time, and we'd love to do it. We'd love to have you back on. I know that we're going to have a lot of emails and just people with more questions. How come you didn't ask about this? And could you have asked it in a different way that maybe would have incorporated a different answer? So we'll have to have Daniel Natusch round 2 sometime in the near future.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, Daniel, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Good talking to you, my friend, and hopefully I can talk to you soon.
No worries. Sounds good. You boys take care.
Daniel,